Welcome back to The Healing Habit, where we talk about the importance of healing and how to make it a part of your everyday life. I'm your host, Cassie, and with us, we have brain health coach, life coach, and Harvard University forgiveness champion, Renatha Lollis. Renatha, I'm so excited to have you here today.
Thank you so much, Cassie. I'm happy to be here.
Amazing. Okay, so this episode, we are going to be talking about making the decision to forgive, which,
Yes.
like we said in the last episode, that's the big one.
Yes, it
Okay.
can really be. And so remembering that as we're engaging with this forgiveness model, everything that we're doing is progressive,
Yeah.
right? That we're moving along a ladder that helps us move toward the ultimate, which is offering forgiveness, which is the sixth and final step. And we'll talk about that in the last episode. And there is a distinction between deciding to forgive and offering forgiveness. We're going to go into that in a little bit more detail so we understand that these are two distinct steps in the forgiveness model.
Yeah.
And just to remind people, as we walk through the forgiveness model, we had the first step, which was acknowledging the offense.
Mhm.
Secondly, we then identified the emotions attached to it. Then, third, we talked about who's really impacted by holding on. And in the last episode, we detailed and went into more in depth discussion of who we could be if we let go of the offense.
Mhm.
And then finally, we're at step 5. This is where some of the greatest struggle can actually appear as we're walking through forgiveness. It's at that point of decision. Because we can have all of the information about forgiveness. We can understand what we feel, who we could be, but now we have to do that place of wrestling.
Mm.
We've got to enter into the actual decision to forgive. And I remember many years ago watching an interview of a really famous actor. And this actor had been known in his past to have a really troubling substance abuse problem. And they were in and out of jail and in and out of trouble for decades dealing with this drug problem that had consumed their life. And they had turned a corner and ultimately had was able to beat the drug addiction and move forward with building a career. And as they were talking about that time period of being addicted to drugs, the interviewer asked a question. She asked, was it hard to stop doing drugs? Was it hard to finally break the decision? And he said something that was really shocking to me. His response was no, stopping doing drugs actually wasn't hard. And the interviewer was really shocked. He was like, well, what do you mean? You struggled and battled for so long. How could it not have been hard? And he made this distinction. He said, stopping doing drugs actually wasn't hard. Making the decision to stop doing drugs was actually what was difficult.
Wow.
So when we think about the actual extending of forgiveness, that is going to be much easier once we've decided to forgive.
Mm.
So we have to consider a few things as we're making this decision. And the primary consideration has to be, what is my motivation? Why am I choosing to forgive? What is the reason behind this behavior? So, as we're thinking about the decision behind the behavior, and we understand all of these previous steps was about helping us to get to this place,
Mm.
that forgiveness is not about the other person. Forgiveness is about us. It is about how we will be positively impacted. And when we step into this point of making the decision to forgive, there is one thing that will always raise its head is, do they deserve it?
Mm.
We start thinking about the other person. And as we shift our focus away from ourselves and to the person who actually offended us, that is going to have a huge impact on whether or not we're willing to make the decision to forgive.
Wow. Oh my gosh. I'm sorry. I just have so many things that went through my head as you were saying that cuz like I remember literally last week and I feel like maybe some of our listeners are experiencing this cuz they have to wait or wow. Because they have to wait week to week for each step. So I was sitting there last week and I was like, okay, I'm going to do this step and I'm going to do this step and I'm going to do this step. And I was like, when's the last step? I want to understand, or what's the next step? I want to know what the next step is.
Mm.
And I remember like sitting in my car, like as we have our daily offenses and just like being like, I know I need to forgive this person, you know? Even with the bigger offenses, it's like, I know I need to forgive this person. And it almost felt like I needed to come into agreement with the fact that I needed to forgive that person. 'Cause it's like, that's the step, but agreeing with it and, like, really, like, believing that that's the best thing for you. Because, I mean, it's gotta be the same thing with, like, quitting a substance, you know? It's like, or even, like, I don't know, I won't say that example, but it's gotta be the same thing with, like, quitting a substance, that that it's best for you to stop smoking cigarettes, but you want to, and so you don't agree that that's the best thing for you because in
Right.
your head you're like, the best thing for me though is to like really do what makes me feel good, right?
Mhm.
And sometimes we can trick ourselves into thinking that it makes us feel good, makes us feel better to hold on to that unforgiveness,
Yes.
but really like it's deteriorating
Yes.
your personality.
Okay, so I love this so much because this is exactly what happens.
Yeah.
So think about it as a like a game of tug of war, right? And most kids played that growing up, and where you're pulling and pulling, and the strongest side wins. And if you're in a place where you're bent towards negativity, where your pain and trauma and negative experiences have more control over you, then it is a real possibility that when you are hanging on to unforgiveness, you're simply perpetuating the internal thought processes that you already have.
Mm.
But if you take a moment, and going back to the example that I used in myself of how negative I had become, and I'm typically a very happy, joyful person, and I found my personality changing because I was engaging in such a negative perspective. And when I stopped and said, "This isn't who I want to be," that tug of war, the balance of power began to shift, to change. Because I no longer wanted to be that negative person, but I wanted to get back to the place where I was more joyful, where I had peace. And in that moment, when the balance of power shifted, my desire to be positive sort of shifted everything to now I wanted to forgive
Mm.
because I saw the impact that it had on me. So as we're in that tug of war where it feels good to hold on to the offense, because there's this belief that us standing in unforgiveness is a position of power. The anger that comes along with it, the ability to be able to look at this and say, I'm taking my power back and I'm choosing to hold you accountable. All of this is a false protection
Mhm.
because it isn't real.
Yeah.
All of this is happening internally.
Mhm.
And as we stand in what we perceive as a place of power, we're simply only corroding our best self.
Yeah.
That sand of unforgiveness is going to move throughout our life, and we can very, very quickly become someone that we don't enjoy.
Mm.
And we get to make the decision that as I am choosing to release this unforgiveness, I'm entering into this struggle. I am saying that I want to be someone different. And today I am deciding to take my power back from any negativity so that I can have the real benefit of a healthy, whole life that is moving towards healing every day.
Wow. It's so beautiful to think of the kind of person that you could really be if you just made the decision to forgive, and watching as the process moves forward, it also kind of moves backwards because you start seeing the steps 1, 2, 3 becoming easier. Like,
Yes.
I know for me, I'm like, okay, step one, acknowledge the offense, done. That's the easy one, I feel like. For me at least, I'm like, I'm a very introspective person, so I'm always like, "Okay, that was an offense, that offended me," you know? But then, identifying the emotions behind it and, like, recognizing, like, okay, who that one stings a little bit, recognizing, "Okay, who am I actually, like, affecting here?" I'm like, "I really still feel like I could change them," you know? But then also realizing that when they don't change and when they haven't changed in the past, what that's done to you is actually hurt you and made you a more bitter person. So then you have to decide, do you want to walk around being bitter or do you want to really make the decision to be a more forgiving person? And in doing so, you become lighter and more joyful and better to be around. I mean, have you ever sat next to somebody who was very clearly having a rough day or you can feel it.
Yes.
Like it almost makes you start having a bad day, you know?
Yes.
And I know for me, like I've also struggled with like recognizing I'm doing that right now because people say my face has subtitles. I think we talked about that before.
Yes.
And like I wear my heart on my sleeve. So everybody knows if I'm joyful, people in the room like feed off of that joy. But I've also been told I can suck the light out of the room, because I'm like,
Mhm.
like just scowling
Yeah.
because I'm processing externally through my face, like what happened. And so I think like I don't want to do that anymore, like and striving to be unoffendable means even in the little things, somebody cuts you off in traffic. Can you imagine just being like, dang, okay, next, And like I
Yeah.
would love to be that unoffendable, like for people to be able to say, wow, nothing can get to her,
Yes.
you know?
Well, and here's the thing, the intention is as we engage with this forgiveness model, that every single person is going to become more forgiving. That's the
Mhm.
intention.
Mhm.
Because once you start this process, you'll start to see the benefit of it in so many different areas. And you'll start to understand that what we hold on to absolutely has an impact on us.
Yeah.
But we have the ability to become something different.
Yes.
We're not what happened to us. And it's also important for me to note that when we choose to forgive, what we're not saying is that that person shouldn't be held accountable.
Mm.
Forgiveness is not about erasing
Right.
justice. That's
Right.
not what we're
Mhm.
saying. What we're saying is that we're going to use a beneficial means of accountability that's actually real rather than the false accountability of unforgiveness.
Right.
And so I can still seek justice and choose to forgive you and not allow my internal process to now be damaged because I'm holding on to something with the expectation that I can change another person. And change is always going to be in the control of the individual. We
Yeah.
can't change people.
Yeah.
We may be able to suppress behavior,
Yeah.
but it's not going to be lasting, and it is not going to give us the satisfaction by that we really think that is going to provide.
Yeah.
And even if we feel like it's in that person's best interest, when we decide to forgive, the motivation always has to be about us.
Mhm.
It always has to be about what we seek to get out of this, not about what we're trying to force to happen.
Yeah, that person's transformation is not our responsibility.
Exactly.
We are only in control of ourselves. I can kind of hear the people already who are listening to this who might have opposing viewpoints. I have a potential um argument
Sure,
that
let's
they
hear
might
it.
have
Yes.
because I have this argument. So what do you do when you want to forgive somebody and just operate in letting it go? But you know that there's a possibility, there's, I will say, a non-zero chance that that person will go and badmouth you. And it's like now we want to stand up for ourselves and we want to like put in the fight so that they don't get the story twisted and so everybody can see that you've done everything right because look at all the things that you've said and done and all this stuff and like really what you're doing and is having to hold on to the offense so that you can protect yourself from that kind of situation. I just wanted
Yeah.
to ask that cuz I was just curious what your thoughts were on that.
Well, and that's a really good point.
Mhm.
Because that absolutely can happen where a situation can arise and you have tried to do everything right. And then another party can go out and attack your reputation.
Yeah.
And that's a real challenge. But it still goes back to you being able to control your behavior and no one else's. At the end of the day, that person has the ability to go and do whatever they choose to do. And our decision to forgive can't be based on hypotheticals.
Yeah.
And if that person does go out and malign your character, which is a real possibility, I don't want to act like that doesn't happen because it does happen. My forgiveness of them cannot be based on what they will or will not do.
Yeah.
It still has to be based on me. And your desire to want to protect yourself is a reasonable desire.
Yeah.
It is not something that is strange or It's absolutely reasonable to want to protect your reputation. But here's the truth. We live in a day and time and in a culture with social media and cancel culture where the ability to protect your reputation can end up becoming a full time job that will consume you.
Yeah.
Our responsibility simply has to be to offer to people what we would want them to offer to us and to show up in the world as the best version of ourselves and trust that the people who really know us will know that the truth about us is that you're not that person.
Yeah.
And we only have the ability to control what we can control, and that's us.
Mhm.
And is it hard? Do we have to grieve being, unfairly attacked? Yeah.
Yeah.
And the desire to pick up the sword and defend ourselves and defend our name is a real one, but we have to ask ourselves, what is that gonna cost us?
Yeah.
Who will we become if we step into a place where we're fighting every single person who we thinks has maligned our
Mhm.
character or are attempted to damage our reputation?
Mhm.
Because at the end of the day, I go to bed with Renatha every night and
Mhm.
I look at her in the mirror. So I simply have to answer to myself about how I respond and not allow how other people see me to dictate how I show up in the world.
Um, we can't live our lives afraid to, like, walk off the sidewalk, you know?
Mm,
Like, if we're constantly living in fear, I mean, I could make up some lie about you that was based in 0 truth at all, and you can't walk on eggshells being afraid that I'm gonna do that. You have to just live your life and be you, and like you were saying, trust that the people who know you know that that doesn't sound like Renatha.
yeah.
And so I think it's a scary thing, and I would honestly venture to say that feeling like you need to hold on to the offense so that you can remember what everything that that person did that was wrong and everything that you did that was right. That is most likely a trauma response,
Mm,
and that brings us back to healing in that we need to source that. Where did that come from? Because I find myself in situations like that where I'm facing that fear of like, "Oh my gosh, well, what if this person says this about me? Or what if, like, I lose everything good in my life because of blah, 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 blah?" And I have to sit there and be like, wow, I just drew up some crazy what if scenario. And I need to figure out where that's rooted so I can chop that down, you
yeah.
know?
Well, and it's very important to state that when we're making the decision to forgive, one of the biggest reasons why we stay in unforgiveness is because of fear.
Mm.
Because I'm afraid of being hurt again.
Hmm.
And so unforgiveness feels like protection. So if I have fear that's stopping me from moving forward or fear of what someone may think about me or say about me, it can have an impact on how I engage with forgiveness.
Hmm.
Because fear feels like protection.
Yeah.
And in some regards, when we think about the emotion of fear, it really can protect us from things that are real dangers. So when you have that sense of fear, it can absolutely protect you from a wild animal or from going to a place that may be unsafe. So fear seems real, but it's an as I mentioned earlier, that our emotions are simply information. If I am trying to forgive someone, and as I'm in that process of making a decision, to your point, if I have this emotion, then let's source it back to see where did I first believe this? What makes me believe that staying in this place is going to be any more safe than actually extending forgiveness? And as we look at all of the steps, as they move up progressively, when we make the decision to forgive and we step into that tension, what we're saying is that who we are on the other side of forgiveness is more important and more valuable to us than who we are without it.
Yeah. I always think it's funny thinking about like adrenaline and like the fight, flight, or freeze response and all that
Yes.
stuff. Like if there's an attacker, I'm freezing. Like
Mhm,
I if you tell me that there's a bug above my head, I'm like,
mhm,
um, but for some reason, that adrenaline fight or flight, like I'll fight. I won't fight a tiger, but I will fight a person if
mhm.
they are attacking my personality or even if they are somewhat even remarkably close or triggering me in some capacity,
Yeah.
And so I'm thinking of that adrenaline response and how it's really hard to think critically. So if you're in a situation where there maybe isn't necessarily harmful intent. Let's say you are in the Amazon and you're like looking at all of the animals around you. I don't know. Do people go to the Amazon?
They do.
Okay. I
Mhm.
was just making sure. But you're in the Amazon and you're looking at all the animals around you, and all of a sudden you see like a dangerous animal that you've been told to fear your entire life. If that animal makes any kind of a sudden move, you might feel this adrenaline response to protect yourself by whatever means necessary.
Mhm.
You aren't going to think critically, wow, that animal's, probably aiming for that banana over there on that tree. You're going to think, wow, that monkey is coming down from that tree and he's going to take my hair into its hands and drag me around, like I'm
Yes.
just thinking, I've actually heard of monkeys doing that to people.
Yes.
So, it's something where when adrenaline hits, it's really hard to think critically. So how do we take that step into thinking critically when the adrenaline is in um a conversation?
Well, first off, let's just be happy that, we probably won't have to worry about that dangerous animal coming after us walking down the street. But to your point, we can have situations that happen in the moment where we're involved in an argument or a discussion that can get really passionate, or someone attacks our character, or whatever the issue is, or it betrays us. When we are confronted with that issue where our adrenaline spikes and our emotions get really, really high, it's in those moments where we have to understand that we're probably not going to make the best decision and take a beat, take a step back, because we don't have to respond. We don't have to engage. We have the ability as adult or even as young people to be able to say, I'm not going to engage with this for right now. I'm going to take a step back, and I'm not going to allow my emotions to control how I behave. So as you grow in maturity, that becomes easier and easier and easier. You learn your limits, and you learn how to be able to take a step back with experience. The repetition is the mother of skill, is an old saying that I've heard. And so the more we do something, the greater our skill level becomes. So as you practice, as your emotions rise and you begin to identify when they start to escalate, the issue is that we don't understand that we have a decision point. And in any situation, it can be very small. And as I'm working with people in my coaching practice, helping them to understand where that decision point actually is, where I can go left in emotionality and allow the emotions to control me, or I can go right in response. So we're talking about the difference between reacting and responding.
Right.
And so as we are learning that our reactions may be instinctive, they are going to happen immediately, but we have the ability to stop and respond. That's going to be based on our intellect and information, where we don't have to allow the emotions to control us, but we can think through this and then have a response.
Yeah.
And in that process of getting more and more experience doing this, we'll be able to identify that decision point and not fall trapped to what our adrenaline response could potentially be. And this leads us back to that decision to forgive. When we understand that we have the ability to enter into a thought process based on information and make a choice that is going to be beneficial to us, the decision to forgive becomes easier and easier in every situation. It's almost as if you have a muscle. So think about the first time you go to the gym and you start lifting weights. When you leave the gym, you are going to be so sore because you're exercising a muscle that you've not used before.
Mhm.
And for many of us, forgiveness is like this. It is a muscle that we're choosing to exercise. And the more that we do it, the stronger that muscle becomes. And the more we can engage with forgiveness, the easier it is to decide to forgive.
Would you say that that's like emotional exhaustion would be the kind of fatigue that you'd be feeling similar to how you're like leaving the gym, you feel really sore after stretching that muscle?
Mhm.
Like is it like emotional or like mental exhaustion because you just worked that muscle?
It can be.
Okay.
And so maybe it isn't necessarily exhaustion, but it can be strain
Mhm.
because you are exercising this muscle. You're doing something you've not done before. And as your life and your brain begins to see the benefits of forgiveness, you're able to engage with this topic in more meaningful ways and have a better all overview of engaging with forgiveness.
Yeah. Well, and that reminds me too of that example that I was giving man, I can't remember if this was this episode or last episode, but I was talking about that friend that I accidentally kind of like snapped at because I think this was last episode.
Mhm.
I was assuming that she was going to do something that she wasn't even remarkably close to doing. That was just a trigger on my end. The speed at which I apologized is a step in the right direction.
Yes.
And I think that that's important, especially for people who like to look at their lives in like baby steps, or like if anybody likes to have like super detailed checklists so that you have more things to cross off, like that's one thing to cross off. Just even recognizing it faster after it happens. Because I think like, gosh, catch me like a couple months ago, I might have been talking to that person, snapped at them, maybe realized it on my drive home, and then not said anything for 2 days, because, oh, maybe it wasn't a big deal to them, like all that kind of stuff. Recognizing, wow, that was something that I did wrong. And I'm going to now apologize for that because I'm now aware of the little um moments that my what were we talking about, the adrenaline
Yeah.
kind of kicked in.
Mhm.
That was a moment that I was triggered, but I recognized it so quickly afterwards and apologized so quickly
Yes.
afterwards. The next step would be to recognize it before.
So the goal is for your recovery time to get shorter and shorter and shorter.
Mhm.
Because what you're describing is a modeling a behavior, and then your brain is developing a neural pathway and it is starting to identify this behavior. So as you move into it, the first time it was a little bit longer, you didn't think about it until you were in your car. The next time you actually said it, but you were aware of it. And what will happen as your brain begins to formulate the response before it ever leaves your mouth, you'll be able to engage with it. And
Wow.
that's the goal, is that the more we engage with this behavior, the faster our recovery time becomes. And as I mentioned to you in the first episode, whereas when you first engage with the forgiveness model, you may have to take a step away and spend, a couple of days sort of working through each one of these steps. But as you engage with it over and over, your recovery time will get to the point where you can do it instantaneously in the moment.
Wow.
And you will be able to engage with forgiveness and living an unoffendable life.
Wow. We're healing.
Yes.
I love that you were saying that about the neural pathways too, because
Yeah.
it's like that's a scientific thing where there's actually proof that you are healing
Yes.
and you're making a habit out of that, which is why this is now called the healing habit. I just love that. Wow, that is so good. I think that's all the time we have for this episode. But thank you guys so much for listening to this episode of The Healing Habit. If you're interested in diving a little bit deeper into this topic, we have links in the description down below. And if you're seeking professional help as well, those will be included in that description as well. I'm your host, Cassie,
And I'm Renatha.
and join us for next time where we're going to be talking about the sixth and final step, which is actually offering the gift of forgiveness, right?
Yes, yes, that's it.
Okay, so there's a difference between pledging and actually doing it. So I'm excited about that. Thanks guys for listening. We'll see you in the next episode. Bye.